Good morning. This is Natalie Gillian. Welcome to the Minnesota Bike Walk Leadership Network webinar. We're happy to see all of you here. I'm going to share my screen and then we will get started. So welcome to our webinar this morning. I'm excited to introduce our speaker today in just a moment. This is the Minnesota Bike Walk Leadership Network webinar, and we will be welcoming Michael Wojcik in a few minutes here. And this is our back to school episode, September 20th, 2023. So first, we want to just learn a little bit about who is on the webinar today. So if you could type into the chat box your name, your location, and this is just a question to get a little bit more information about who's here and where you like to ride your bike. What's your favorite place to ride bikes in Greater Minnesota? So go ahead and type that into the chat box as well, and let's see where you like to ride across this wonderful state of Minnesota here, and welcome you to the webinar. This is the Minnesota Bike Walk Leadership Network, and the purpose of this network is to connect local bike walk leaders to share stories and ideas about how they're lifting up the walking and biking culture in their communities. BikeMN has a land acknowledgement statement, and I'll go ahead and read that. We want to acknowledge that Minnesota is the ancestral land of the several indigenous groups, including the Dakota, Ojibwe, Ho-Chunk, Cheyenne, Oto, Iowa, and Meskwaki people. We honor with gratitude the land itself and the people who have stewarded it throughout the generations. We affirm the Bicycle Alliance Minnesota's commitment to a partnership with Native nations and urban Indian communities. Despite centuries of colonial violence, this is still and always will be Indigenous land. Indigenous peoples are still here, demonstrating innumerable talents and gifts in the midst of continued oppression. They must be celebrated and uplifted. You'll see on the screen a link, and Mel will share that in the chat box as well. If you'd like to find out what native land you're currently located on, you can also use this tool to find out what native land the places that you might be working in are located on as well. Minnesota Safe Routes to School Network also has a monthly webinar. Their next webinar is Thursday, October 5th from 10 to 11, and the topic will be Building Better Streets, Infrastructure 101, and the grant announcement. So tune in there if you would like to learn more about the Minnesota Safe Routes to School Network and get plugged into that topic. Julie J at movemn.org is where you can email to get some more information and get plugged into that group. So the next thing I'd like to do here is welcome our speaker, and I'm excited to welcome Michael Wojcik, the Executive Director for the Bicycle Alliance of Minnesota. Welcome to the webinar, Michael.
Thank you for having me. I'm absolutely excited to introduce myself and share a little bit of our organization's vision and my vision, and maybe how we can work together in the future. I think we're going to have a relatively small audience today because in reality, I'm in Rochester today for the SHIP statewide conference, and I'm guessing there are a lot of folks who would normally join us who are at that conference. So partly we're speaking to the audience that are here, but we're also trying to make a piece of information that people can review and learn a little bit about us if they come back and watch the video at a later date. A little bit about my bio right there, but what I would say is that I am passionate about active transportation, and in particular about being safe around active transportation. I believe it's something that empowers people. I believe it's something that is one of the best tools for addressing climate change and also equity in our state. I think that once somebody has the confidence, the ability, and the place to bike, walk, or roll, it's something that is a positive influence in their life and creates a higher standard of living for them and those around them. So all of that lofty language aside, a little bit about my background. I am truly a person who knows Minnesota pretty well. I grew up originally on the Iron Range. West Cohasset Township is where I spent most of my time. I went to college, then first in Hibbing and then at the University of North Dakota. So I spent time in the Red River Valley as well. And then I moved down to Rochester. I have degrees in electrical engineering and business administration. I came down to Rochester to work for IBM, where I fulfilled a number of different roles. I haven't put that electrical engineering degree to a whole lot of good use, but I've done a lot of other fun things in the community. Probably down here in Rochester, what I'm best known for is I served 12 years on the city council for the city of Rochester. Really a pretty long time to do a position like that. And then also I really got to focus on issues that I cared a lot about, and certainly that has to do with safe biking, walking, rolling. And what you'll hear from me too is I sometimes talk about aspects of safe biking, walking, rolling that might be outside of the purview of what this group normally thinks about, but it really does create an ecosystem where we're better off. In Rochester, I have a wife, Lisa, two children who are now teenage girls. So when I'm asked about spending a little bit more time up in the Twin Cities, that's okay with me at the moment. And they're doing quite all right on their own. And so I also, principally as a cyclist, I bike for transportation, and I became known as a bicycle advocate in Rochester simply because I didn't dislike bicyclists. And I actually showed up for meetings on a bicycle, which people thought was incredibly novel. And I must be making some sort of political statement by riding to a bicycle. And actually, it was just easy and I liked it. And I do, as I've grown, I realize the health benefits that come along with being able to bike, walk, roll to different places. It's a huge benefit. And I think a lot of times we focus on the physical health, but I think the mental health benefits are as strong or stronger, particularly as people age. I think that when you experience your community, walking, biking, rolling, you have a lot more interactions with the place where you live. And I think that that's positive for everybody's mental health. And I think coming out of the pandemic, I realized that even more. Uh, one of the goals that I have is that, and we'll get into some of the goals later on, but I really understand that BikeMN is a statewide organization, and we want to be a statewide organization, and we want to work in the parts of the state where maybe you haven't seen us as much. And that's where the folks on this call and other networks are going to help us get more involved where we can be of service. Would it be okay if we jump to the next slide, Natalie? So most of you are familiar with BikeMN's work, and my predecessor, Dorian, is a legend in bicycling in the state of Minnesota. And one of the first things they'll teach you in business school is when you find a position, what you don't want to take the position that a legend just had. So I've already kind of messed that up. But I will say, as I was contemplating on whether or not to apply for this position, I called Dorian and had a nice long conversation with him. And I talked to him about what my skills were and where there were gaps in my skills. And Dorian assured me that he's going to continue to be part of our team, just albeit in a different role, and that some of those areas where I needed to learn, he was going to continue to be involved. So I'm happy to stand on the shoulders of the work that Dorian and the team has done before me, but also look to bring some of my own priorities to the team as well. The first thing that I'm really going to highlight on, and I've already mentioned, is that I do want to see the Bicycle Alliance Minnesota, BikeMN used interchangeably. Really have more of a presence throughout the entire state. A lot of times we're known for some of the big events we do, and we have fun events. Typically, we do events on the Tour de Saints, which is kind of north central Minnesota. The St. Paul Classic is our big one that just finished up. Mankato River Ramble, and Albert Lee also does a ride down there that's a lot of fun. These are great events for showing off communities and building communities, but you'll notice there's big parts of the state that we've missed in that. And one of my goals is to figure out how can we have more of a presence in northwestern Minnesota and the Red River Valley, southwestern Minnesota, the North Shore, Duluth. I mean, how can we not be doing fun bicycling events as an organization up there? It just seems like a huge opportunity that we have. And, finally, my adopted hometown of Rochester, we've really become a tremendous center for cycling, and we have phenomenal bicycling infrastructure down here. Lanesboro, which is one of the small towns around us, is really built on cycling infrastructure. And we need to figure out how to celebrate all that we have in Minnesota in different places. I like to say that if there's a state park near your town in Minnesota, there's probably some sort of a trail connecting to them. And that's because it's something that everywhere in the state of Minnesota, people appreciate having those amenities. It adds to the quality of life. And sometimes we live in a hyper partisan environment, but I always like to remind people that no matter what political background you come from, bicycling and walking is more popular than you are. So that's always a little humbling experience that we can keep in mind. I talk a lot about safe bicycling and walking, and I think too many times we speak about that in a vacuum. We're talking about how do we make this trail or this path or this lane safer? How do we address this corridor? And what we don't sometimes address is the passive safety features around it. And there's a lot of folks that will tell you if you're on a dark trail at night by yourself, there's a lot of folks who aren't going to feel comfortable in that environment. If you're in a trail that connects a lot of places and there's lots of different places where people interact and there are a lot of people using it, there's a passive safety that's there as well. And you can't just build a trail or a connection that generates those results. You actually have to think about the community that you're in and what's surrounding it. And one of the things in my time on the city council here in Rochester that I focused on quite a bit was to not only figure out where we have great infrastructure, but how do we build and create opportunities along that infrastructure and make sure that we're getting the most out of that infrastructure and people are benefiting from it and people have fun places that they can go on their bicycle or walking. And one of my standing talking points in Rochester is if you build a brewery in Rochester, I was going to build a bridge to that site for you. So it wasn't an official policy, but what it points to is things like breweries or other common places that are popular now for people to meet. They tend to be places that people want to go, and they tend to locate in places where people want to go. So I always kind of say if you're building a bridge to those places, you're probably building a bridge to a lot of other places as well that are really empowering people to get around and enjoy. Probably the biggest battle that I've had during my time as an elected official is the whole issue of safe routes to school. And sometimes, and I know that's not the purpose of this particular committee, but a lot of times when we're talking about safe biking and walking, that's a group that we're talking about. And we spend a lot of time figuring out how to fix the mistakes that we've made in the past without necessarily thinking about how do we prevent recreating those mistakes in the future. And one of the challenges that I had as an elected official is just if you build a school in a poor location at the edge of town where you have to build a massive amount of new infrastructure and nobody is in the walk shed or bike shed for that particular area, you can spend the next 100 years trying to build safe infrastructure that would have already been there if you had put a little bit more thought into where you located that. And this is true for schools, but it can be true for a lot of other things as well. I've been critical of the Minnesota Department of Education's guidance for how you locate schools, because there's really a push to create a lot of lightly used green space around the schools while completely ignoring green space that might already exist in the community. And for everyone with a public health aspect, when we look at the health and the obesity rates of children today, we have to ask ourselves, is this enormous green space that we build around our schools forcing them to be in more isolated parts of the community, resulting in children that are more fit than was the case when we built our school buildings in neighborhoods and in towns? And everyone knows the answer to that is clearly that is not the case. So while I believe in safe walking and biking, I'm also a full member of the Urban Land Institute, who deals with a lot of land use issues. And I served on a national healthy corridors committee with that organization. And I also chaired a group called the National League of Cities Community and Economic Development National Committee. And these were all organizations that wanted to not only create safe biking, walking infrastructure and improving the infrastructure for those that are there, but also build the community around it, create development opportunities so that more people live, walk, enjoy those corridors. And I know that's not traditionally been something that folks in advocacy organizations around biking and walking infrastructure have talked as much about, but I really think we're going to find new allies and new opportunities both in large cities and small cities, looking at the infrastructure and land use together. And this is one of those things too that it might sound like a big city thing to some of you, but I can tell you there are hundreds of towns throughout Minnesota with beautiful downtowns that people love going to, but literally no one bikes and walks there anymore because that's not the way the cities are built. And as we focus some of those investments to happen naturally and try to create opportunities to engage those spaces, even the smallest Minnesota communities can see a more lively, vibrant downtown that people enjoy. So that is my soapbox. Really integrating land use and transportation is so important to me. That is absolutely a hill that I will choose to die on, but there's a lot of other great things we do as an organization as well. And one of those is, I'm blessed to come into a team at BikeMN that has really talented educators. And we do some great programs throughout Minnesota and also in the Twin Cities. And one of them that I really have come to love is we do an adult learn to ride program. Now that happens to be currently funded by the Metropolitan Council, which does limit the locations where we can put those on. But with the influx of new transportation dollars that are out there, if any of these programs that we're working on are something that you think is a good fit for your community, well, we just need to find some funding sources to help make that happen. And that's where you, as some of our partners throughout the state, whether you're Metro or Greater Minnesota, there are ways to get these programs. Adult Learn to Ride, that is a program that really, every time we put on a class, it's pretty much oversubscribed. And the people who are benefiting from that are some of the people who don't always see the benefits from the investments in transportation dollars. There's a lot of people of color, BIPOC communities, immigrant communities, folks that are just have never learned to ride a bike before, lower income communities. And as folks in this program learn to ride a bike safely, and learn how to navigate their communities and also receive the equipment that they need to be successful. It is truly empowering people to take what is a substantial part of any family's budget and greatly reduce that expense that they're facing. So when I talk about biking, walking, rolling, I use equity interchangeably with that because that is one of the greatest tools for equity we have in our state, which is unfortunately known for some pretty substantial equity divides between race and class. Lastly, one of the things that I really want to focus on is advocacy to local governments. Those of you that follow us know that we had tremendous successes at the state legislature, historic successes that every state around Minnesota is incredibly envious of everything we accomplished this last session. But I also know for working 12 years in local government, if you want to enact change that quickly affects people's lives, local governments is where that action happens. I am fond of saying that local government is the highest form of government because it's the closest to the people. And I truly believe that. And I can tell you that most of the changes that we made here in Rochester, going from a pretty difficult to now a pretty popular bikeable downtown, has to do with improvements that we did at the local level, and we did them incrementally, and they were driven by the community because the community is close to those decision makers. So while we've been very successful advocating at the state level, I think it's incredibly important that we bring that advocacy to local levels. And that means that you might not have a big team in your community, but here, surprise, actually you do. You have us at BikeMN who want to make biking, walking, rolling safe in all parts of Rochester. And if there are local issues, challenges, opportunities, we absolutely want to be your partner in doing that work. It is important that everywhere in the state of Minnesota, people have access to safe biking, walking, rolling. So we absolutely want to be your partners. But more than that, we know that government is very risk adverse. It is hard to convince governments to do new things because they're scary and they might fail. What governments, particularly local governments, are great at doing is copying success stories, because that is the easiest thing to do. And we have success stories all over the state of Minnesota. So it's not only about trying to make change, it's about finding those stories that have been successful in all of your communities and using us to share that to a statewide audience, because sometimes it's the little things. You can make small changes to the geometry of curbs at an intersection and make it so much safer for everybody involved. We have this tiny little neighborhood right outside of downtown in Rochester called Kutsky Park, and one of the most effective things that we ever did to improve the safety in that area is we took an area where the road was wide enough that people could get on the shoulder and make a right turn at a popular intersection, that everyone was using this neighborhood street as a cut through for through traffic. All we did as part of a project where we were already tearing up the street, we made it narrow enough that if you want to make that right turn, you had to stay in line with everyone else. And the traffic dropped by 2/3. And that was never intended to be a through street. That cost nothing to do it, but it was a huge success story for that neighborhood. So that's a little bit about some of the things that, in addition to all the work that BikeMN has been so successful with, I hope to help bring to the team. Let's go ahead and jump to the next page. And I do want to touch on legislative wins, and it's very important for me to disclose these are hugely important, and I had almost nothing to do with this. This is the team that I inherited, and a couple of those team members are here. I know a couple of our board members are on the call. Mel, our awesome new communications person, is here, and Natalie, who was previously with us but still with us as a consultant, is here. So thank you all for the work that you've done. You all have more to do with all these accomplishments than I do. I just get to sit here and read them off. That's I guess that's the glory of being an executive director, apparently, or something like that. But we can't get through everything that happened this year, but there are some big wins and big opportunities and big responsibilities that we all carry as well. Wins don't go on forever, and you have to prove that people's lives are made better by the things that we accomplish. So here's a few of the things that I really want to point to, though. State law used to say that schools may educate on safe biking and walking. That has been changed to a shall. It's now a mandate. In the first 3 weeks of school, every school is supposed to teach K-8 students safe biking and walking. Here's the thing. Do all the schools know that, and are they doing it right now? Almost certainly not the case. This is brand new. Are there good materials out there? Well, again, it's brand new. What we wanted to do is be part of the solution. And what we actually did is the URL that you can see in the slide right here is actually this will bring you to a landing page where we as a BikeMN team have put all of the resources that might be helpful towards meeting these standards, whether it be from our Walk Bike Fun program, the actual law itself, other tools that we might have to just teach kids about safe biking, walking, rolling. That we tried to put it in one location. This is that one location, and I encourage you all to bookmark it, share it with folks in your community school districts, others who might benefit. We're going to continue to work on this. This is a work in process. We wanted to have something together for the beginning of school year. We know that people are already finding this location, but it's there as a public resource and something that we're doing to try and help keep kids safe. Second thing, not a huge amount of money, but in terms of popularity and in terms of clicks, it's been one of the most common things we hear is there are rebates for e-bikes. Now, it's pretty heavily income limited, but this is going to be beneficial for folks that would benefit from e-bikes but really have a financial limitation in getting them. If you want to get a real safe, durable e-bike, you're probably looking in the range of $1,500 to $2,000 starting out. And what this rebate is going to do is it's going to cover up to 75% of that cost. Now that's only up to a household income of $40,000 or $50,000, something like that. And then the amount of the rebate that you get falls off after that. But I think there are a lot of folks, particularly maybe seniors living in fixed income, younger families, immigrant families who have a need for transportation outside of the automobile, that this could potentially help. You're getting a certificate ahead of time. The bike shops know about this. We're still waiting on the Minnesota Department of Revenue for some guidance on this program. I will say there's only a few $1 million in this program. I expect all the money to be gone within hours of it being available. So we're putting all of our information in one place again, so you can click on the link. As we get more information on how exactly this is going to work, we'll continue to put information there. But our goal is to get this information out to those who benefit, because part of having a new program like this is if it's successful and people use it and people benefit from it, that's a great way to keep that program going into the future. A couple of other items. what's described as the Idaho stop. It's kind of a common sense practice, but it actually makes road users safer. It used to be that if you came to a stop sign, you were expected to come to a complete stop as a cyclist. And if there is somebody who has the right of way, you are still expected to do that. However, if you are approaching a stop sign now, a bicyclist may treat that as a yield sign. That means that if you don't have the right of way, for example, you're coming to a four-way stop and there is a car to your right, that vehicle would still have the right of way and you still should stop. However, you can continue through the stop sign if there's just no one there or nobody affecting you. It's one of those things that can be maddening for automobiles, but what it really does is it keeps cyclists out of the danger zone, which is the intersection, and that's why places that have this, it is actually statistically safer than not having it. And it's a bit of a common sense measure. And there was a study many years ago in Portland, and because everyone likes to complain about people not stopping at stop signs. And so they did a study of this one particular intersection. They found that 90% of bicyclists did not come to a complete stop at the stop sign, and 80% of cars did not come to a complete stop at the stop sign. That's probably not unusual for what we're seeing. This is a tool for cyclists. It also, I live on top of a big hill, and right as I get on that hill, there was a stop sign at a frontage road, and I would come to a complete stop because I was on the city council, and if I ran that stop sign, you better believe it would have been in the newspaper. But now I can look, there's no cars coming because there's never any cars coming there. And I go through that stop sign. I don't have to come to a complete stop and get myself going again uphill in the narrow one-lane section of that road. So it's a win for me, and it's a win for all those drivers behind me that were really angry at me as well. It's key. This does not mean cyclists get to blow all stop signs, but it's something that's a law in a lot of parts of the country. It's now a law in Minnesota as well. One that you might not have heard as much about, but probably is as important, has to do with bike lanes that become part of right turns. And if you've been in any city with bike lanes, you've probably seen this. As you get close to an intersection, if there's not room, you will actually have the bike lane as part of the right turn lane. Well, the letter of the law as it used to be meant that if you were in the bike lane, you had to turn right there. You couldn't continue straight, even if that bike lane picked up on the other side of the intersection. Now what you were supposed to do is, as a cyclist, you were supposed to go into the drive lane, leave the bike lane, go into the drive lane, go through the intersection, and then you could rejoin the bike lane on the other side. Well, that was ridiculous and no one was doing it, and it wasn't a law that was being enforced. However, where it comes into play is if you had something like a fatal crash at an intersection or something like this, and you were a cyclist who was following the bike lane straight, that could be an issue where you might have some challenging legal position because you as a cyclist might have been violating the letter of the law at the time the crash occurred. So this is one of these common sense things that have now become law. Last thing I'm going to touch on, and this is a big one for all of us, there's a lot of money, and for the most part, it's one-time money that is going into active transportation. Compared to what we spend on transportation as a state, it is a pittance, but is a tremendous opportunity. And I think this is where I would say it's incumbent on all of us to get wins out of this money that's out there, whether it's bringing new programming to our communities, getting more people out doing safe biking, walking, rolling, demonstrating projects that really improve the safety of our communities. This is, we have to show results with this. And this is something that I want to help every community do, is show positive results using this one-time money. Because if we're going to continue to have funding for these programs in the future, we're going to need to show that we deliver meaningful results. So it's both a tremendous opportunity, resources that we've never had before, but it's also a responsibility on all of us to make sure that we use that money appropriately. And that's where an organization like our team at BikeMN, we want to work with you throughout the state. So I think in summary, I really want that back and forth, not just with the metro communities, but all around the state. How can we work together, BikeMN and Greater Minnesota, to really improve biking, walking, rolling for all people in all places as part of the state? How do we educate on these new rules? How do we use these new tools to be successful? And how can we better take your success stories from around the state of Minnesota and share them all over, because there are some fantastic things that are going on in Grand Marais, Minnesota, that would fit right in downtown Laverne, 400 plus miles away. And that's not something that you might necessarily see in, as a small community leader, but as a statewide organization, it's our duty to share these successes and get them repeated throughout the states. So that is a long-winded explanation. I did warn everybody that you were giving the microphone to somebody who was a politician for 12 years, so you should have expected nothing less than this. That said, I know we've left time to go through some questions and answers. And I know I'm speaking to a relatively small audience here, but I'm hoping that we'll share this video around with folks who are normally on these calls as well. And I encourage you, I'm easy to contact. I'm Michael@BikeMN.org. You don't have to worry about spelling that last name. It's just Michael@BikeMN.org. You can probably handle that. The entire team is excited to get going and doing some of these. One thing about working for a nonprofit like BikeMN, our team is full of people who love to be here, who love the mission, who care about this, and that makes them great teammates for you as well. So thank you for entertaining my monologue, and let's do the far more interesting thing of maybe answering some questions and having a discussion.
Thank you so much, Michael. This is what happens when we bring on an excellent new leader who's excited about this work and as you can tell, passionate about all of these things, including the land use and transportation piece. I'm really glad that you mentioned those pieces as part of your presentation, and it's great to see some local representation here on the webinar today. I just want to give a shout out to folks in Rochester, Roseville, Minneapolis, Fergus Falls, and St. Anthony Village, all joining us today and hearing this message from Michael, and also the folks that will listen to this replay. So thank you so much. All right, I'm going to move on to the next slide here, and we do have a few questions and answers. I've prompted these questions to discuss a little bit more about some of the programming. This kind of dials in on engaging the folks that are on this call in some dialogue with Michael. So first off, I just want to ask if there's anyone that is on this webinar today who has been trained on Walk Bike Fun or trained to be a Walk Bike Fun ambassador. If you want to use Zoom tools here and raise your hand or give a reaction, we can use the tools that are at our disposal here. But who's heard of the ambassador program for Walk Bike Fun? So, all right, Bob, thank you so much. All right, so and Michael, wonderful. So who can become a Walk Bike Fun ambassador, Michael?
Yes. Yes. Really, just about anyone can become a Walk Bike Fun ambassador. This is part of communicating the program that we have as BikeMN to a statewide audience. I tend to, as much as possible, when I have questions about Walk Bike Fun, I like to defer to some of my teammates, Angela and the education team, because this is in their wheelhouse. And if I speak too much about it, I'm probably doing them a disservice. But the reality is this is a program that is funded through the Department of Transportation statewide. We welcome questions about it, and we certainly want to get into more communities. We've had a pretty successful rollout of this. We've been involved in a lot of communities, but there's a lot of parts of Minnesota that we haven't yet touched. And I appreciate you asking me that question, Natalie, but I'm going to turn this around too, because I think that we all know this. You know more on this topic than I do.
Well, this is the tag team today. I'm happy to talk a little bit about this. I'm excited for bike education and walk education throughout Minnesota. And, being a Walk Bike Fun ambassador and trainer of the program previously when I was at BikeMN, this was something that was really exciting for folks to learn about. So folks on the webinar or folks listening to this replay, you may have heard about the teacher training program and the Walk Bike Fun training going out to the schools statewide here in Minnesota, where the teachers can then become educated on how to teach this curriculum in the schools. Now, you put a teacher with 30 kids and you put them all on bikes, they need a little bit of help. So they can always use another few people, to help out with those types of programs in the schools and to roll out that curriculum. So the Walk Bike Fun ambassadors are folks throughout the state of Minnesota who are learning how to be those assistants to the teachers in the schools and provide that support so that those education programs are successful at the schools and can be built into that curriculum for that sustainability over time. So I will just mention those couple of things. As Michael mentioned, anyone can become a Walk Bike Fun ambassador. And I do encourage you to do that because it helps to contribute to that bike education that's foundational for making those safer routes to school for the kids so that they can learn those safe walking and biking skills and put them into practice. So that leads into the next question here about how can local communities support bike and walk education in Greater Minnesota? And I guess I can ask Michael this question or other folks that are on the webinar. I guess I would invite you to go off mute if you have some ideas about how you can best support that bike education in your communities. So I'll open up the question for anyone who's on the call right now. If you'd like to engage in a little dialogue about how do you provide that support within your community. And as you're thinking a little bit, oh, go ahead, Michael. Go ahead.
I'll take the first shot at this, and I'll say that all action starts local, and being an advocate in your own community is hands down the best place to start. Obviously, I got to put my BikeMN hat on here, and we are a membership organization, and we encourage folks to engage with us, become members with us. But the reality is part of what we're doing is we're helping to enable our local partners to be successful.
Absolutely. And I know, with the work with BikeMN, understanding what those local goals are and being able to offer some programming that helps support and achieve those local goals that the community members come up with is really important, with that educational piece being really foundational. One other thing that Michael touched on earlier in his presentation was the success stories. And if you've been to the bikemn.org website, you may see a little information about some of those success stories already that are promoted on there. Thank you, Mel, and others who have shared those stories on the BikeMN website. You also might share your stories, being able to give that picture in Minnesota of a bicycle-friendly community and the bicycle-friendly state that is statewide, that has all this really cool things happening. Like Michael mentioned, Grand Marais and bringing that to Laverne. And we had communities like Battle Lake, Minnesota, and Frazee, Minnesota, that didn't even have a stop light and became a bicycle-friendly community. These are really exciting stories to share. So if you'd like to get those shared out with the broader statewide audience, those can be shared through BikeMN's website. So definitely to bring those forward and share those stories. So what makes a success story? So how do you know that you've achieved success for biking and walking in your community? What are some things that looks like? And again, I'll throw it at Michael or open it up to other folks who might want to jump in here.
So Natalie, and I just love when things sometimes come up and they fly out of my mouth before I think about them too much. But one of the, what I'd really love to see, maybe as like a regular feature of this call is just, find somebody who can just share a small success story each time we have one of these calls, because there really are so many of them out there. Another small example that I like to point to in Rochester is we literally took a school that was in an old urban neighborhood, and all we did is we reversed a one-way that was going to the school to going away from the school, and we put a couple of signs up closing down that one block of street for a couple hours a day. The project cost almost nothing and was just tremendously successful because you had cars double and triple parking on that street in front of there. And as a little bit of a background, I happened to be showing off that project to somebody who I just met many years ago. His name was Dorian Grilly, who subsequently I came to have a little bit more of a relationship with. That project was probably done for under $3,000, and it was a huge win for the community and that school.
Very cool. We have a couple other folks here in across Minnesota that are on the webinar today, and if you have we, you know, Michael mentioned the active transportation dollars and to really operationalize some of these projects locally using some of those dollars that are available in the upcoming year and years here. There's infrastructure projects, there's education. We talked a lot about that. There's advocacy work that could be done. Is there anyone else that's on this webinar that would like to share a story about something that's been successful in your community? It could be a walk bike fun training, a bikeable community workshop, a maintenance training, something that you did to change the infrastructure to make it safer for biking and walking in your community. I'm just mentioning a few things because sometimes those things that you do and they may not seem like they're having a huge impact do eventually have a huge impact on the locals and how they get around their community. Bob, would you like to share something?
Sure. This is a project that's just starting now, so it isn't quite on the list of total success, but I think it is a success that we're getting going. We're partnering with one of Bike Minnesota's partners, AARP, and I don't know how many of you know this, but Roseville, in spite of the Rosedale Shopping Center and all that, is very much a senior location for a lot of seniors now in the community, and we're starting right now through AARP a walk audit to look at all of the pathways are there, the intersections, speed, and so on. We meet next week with the Public Works Commission in Roseville, and the following week with the Parks and Recreation Commission, and then following that, we're putting together the groups that will go out and do the walk audit.
That's great to hear, Bob. Last year, Mallory's on the call too. We were both walking college fellows last year and graduated last fall. And part of the work that we did was to use the AARP Walk Audit Toolkit that's available through AARP.
That's what we're using. Yep.
Wonderful. That's great. And, I guess I don't want to give a spoiler alert, but watch AARP for some additional footage on features from Minnesota. Because we're doing a lot of work here in Minnesota that's getting some national attention, which is wonderful to see that come through and showcase some of the really cool work that's happening here.
I think they just did a major one in Rochester about a week ago.
Oh, cool! Yeah, that would be good to share a link in the chat, or maybe we can share it in the email recap as well. Michael, did you want to add something to that?
Well, I can confirm that in fact it did happen on the right at the same weekend as the St. Paul Classic. So despite being in my home community, my allegiances were divided, but I heard that there was a tremendous turnout, something like 60 to 80 people were involved.
Very cool. Well, there we go. We're showcasing Rochester and the walking work in addition to the work that you're doing in Roseville, Bob. Wonderful to hear that. So getting into the detail a little bit more here, how do folks request a training in their community? So this is a good opportunity here. Mel, if you'd like to put a link in the chat box, we'd like to share a little bit more about how to get involved. There is a training coming up soon. The link that I have on the bottom of this slide here is about an upcoming training. And this is training that's happening in St. Paul on Tuesday, October 24th. So this is a training that's coming up that you can participate in person. And you'll see the link in the chat box here if you'd like to get involved here. And then there's also other opportunities if you want to get involved with BikeMN and you'd like to bring some education to your community, you're not sure where to start, or you'd like to speak with someone from our bike education team, then you can click on the link that Mel shared. That is the Walk Bike Fun link. That's Get in Touch. And so that's a little bit more general inbox as far as if you have a question and you're not sure if you're going to register for the October 24th training in person, but you'd like to ask for some other support, technical assistance from BikeMN, you can use that link to get in touch with the education team.
Maybe one other thing that I'd like to pitch as well is that even though it's funded in the metro area only right now through the Met Council, this adult learn to ride has been a really fantastic opportunity. And I think places that you might not think about, like like Worthington or Austin or Wyndham, or places with large immigrant populations, non-English speaking populations, BIPOC populations, could really stand to benefit from that. And what I'm really interested in hearing from our partners from all over the state of Minnesota is what you think your education needs are, because we have different classes that we can teach. Some of them are funded throughout Minnesota, some of them in certain geographies. But understanding what that need is and where you'd like to work with us helps us, and perhaps helps you as well, seek out some funding to put on some of these additional opportunities. Because I do think that you at the local level are going to know what needs to be customized best for your community. We're privileged that we have 4 very talented educators on our team, and they know the topic areas inside and out and have a diverse background. So there's certainly some ability to customize what we do as an organization. Obviously, Walk Bike Fun is a huge program for us right now. It's done a lot of good work throughout the state, and we're going to continue to do that. But I definitely want to hear from other parts of Minnesota. Where do we need to be doing education at? What should that education look like? Because if we know there's a need there, we can seek out some funding as well.
Very good. This is great. I love this opportunity for folks to engage with Michael and with the BikeMN staff and the education team through these avenues of going to the website and clicking on that and sharing your thoughts. All the way from we're interested, we'd like to see this happen. I don't know if I'm the only one that would attend a meeting, but I think it's cool, so I'm going to start there. And Michael, to honor the sharing of stories, this is one I've shared before, but with Thief River Falls, where you have Glenn up in Thief River Falls, who was really excited to begin to learn more about how to become a bicycle-friendly community. And he reached out. He wanted to learn a little bit more. We held a webinar with the folks, and he knew he would attend. We weren't sure who else was going to attend. There was a couple folks that, they gave a thumbs up. They were interested, but we didn't know if they would come to the meeting. Held a webinar. They applied for Bikeable Community Workshop, and the first time around they didn't get it, but they didn't lose hope, and then they applied again, and they became a bicycle friendly community after many years of work. So it started out with Glenn being a real advocate for the work, and going through the Bikeable Community Workshop, and then becoming a bicycle friendly community. And now Thief River Falls is a chapter of the Bicycle Alliance in Minnesota. So it's a really cool success story, beginning to end, that started with one person who was really interested in moving that forward.
I would say that coming into this new role at BikeMN, I'm absolutely impressed with the work that's gone on in Thief River Falls. And as you think of great bicycling destinations in the state of Minnesota, maybe that one didn't come to mind, but don't count out what a small group of innovators can do in a community. And that's a great success story and something that could be modeled all over the state.
Absolutely. And there's more stories to share. So I just share that one because it's so exciting. And, I'm in Bemidji up north. It hasn't started to snow yet, but the leaves are changing. It's still great biking weather. And, you'll hear the quotes, and you've heard it before, there's no such thing as bad weather, just bad clothing, you can bike all year round. And you'll hear about that as we get into our webinar series in the fall and leading into the winter to gear up and prepare for continuing to roll into the winter month as well. So let's see here. I have a couple of additional slides to share. I do want to just underline the point that there are many resources available in the toolbox at BikeMN to support your community for education and to achieve your goals. So definitely go to bikemn.org if you'd like to access some of those resources and that toolkit of educational supplies. So I did put this in here, Michael, as a advocacy slide, BikeMN advocacy. Did you want to speak for a moment to this slide about advocacy in Minnesota?
Yeah, and what I would say too is in our organization, we have 5 different subcommittees with focus areas, and we have an entire advocacy subcommittee. And we sometimes have people who serve on our subcommittees who are not necessarily teammates at BikeMN or board members, but other folks that are interested as well. I made that pitch that we need to be doing more local advocacy as well. CJ on our team is one of our is our kind of our teammate leader on the advocacy. Cindy out of Mankato, Greater Minnesota representation is leading our advocacy committee. So if this is something that's interested to you, if there's a particular topic that you want to get addressed, or if you have concerns about state or local legislation, this is absolutely a group that is looking to interact with you. I mean, we sometimes don't know there's a problem until you tell us there's a problem.
So share your problems with Michael. I think that's what you just said, right?
You know, I'm gonna get the peanuts, the Lucy with the psychiatric help sign. Then maybe I'll just set that up outside the office and we'll have open hours or something. But you'll notice I referenced the advocacy team and my teammates a number of times, because one thing I know is that I can't do it all myself. So that's why we're looking to grow the team and have more people involved.
Absolutely. And, you know, one of the things about that advocacy committee is to get the voice heard throughout the state of Minnesota. You want those greater Minnesota voices to be heard as well. And one of those ways is to serve on the committee and speak, you know, firsthand to the issues that are affecting greater Minnesota. So the other piece here is, if you don't know who your legislators are, there's a link on here to use that search tool to find out who they are. This is oftentimes a very good thing to start with as you lead into, you know, Day on the Hill and lobbying that typically happens around March, April at the Capitol in person. You know, as you lead up into that legislative session, learn who those local legislators are. Find out who they are, learn a little bit of their background, and find out who it is that you might meet with directly if you went to St. Paul to lobby with BikeMN. So, all right. I will share one plug here for the International Walk to School Day, Wednesday, October 4th, 2023. I wanted to put this up on the screen. We've talked a little bit about walking today, and the Walk to School toolkit is available through Minnesota Safe Routes to School. And here are some of the tools. There's a lot of links here, but you can go to the Minnesota Safe Routes to School website here and then get some more information on the toolkit and learn more about, you know, you have resources, flyers to send home with the parents, posters to hang up at the school, walk to school day postcards, and social media posts. All of that is available to you, and you can go to the website here to get those resources so that you can use that. And definitely get walking on Wednesday, October 4th, and other days too. But this is really an opportunity to have those events happen in your community. And this Friday, September 22nd, is the cutoff. That's a deadline to get your school on the map and registered to participate, and then submit your photos to try to win prizes. So one last plug here. So this is I guess Michael, I'll give you the chance to maybe share a little bit more about this and give any closing comments that you might like to share with the group before we wrap up the webinar today.
You know, the weather was amazing for the St. Paul Classic. We had something like 2,200 riders, which is just short of where we have to cut it off. So pretty great turnout for that. The weather was amazing. I've rode the River Ramble a number of times. I love that ride. If you've never been down to the Mankato area, it usually hits fall colors really nice in that area. But you're visiting a state park. There is a stop with pie at it, which is always an important part of bicycling as well. I'm going to be down there. I understand there's going to be a little bit of a ride the day before that I might participate in as well. I would just encourage us, you know, as a group, to, when we see information about this that might be going on in other parts of the state, you know, share each other's events, share what's going on, because the larger audience we reach, I mean, it's going to come to benefit you, and you have events going up there too. I know that we have over 1,000 signups for the River Ramble already, so it's going to be a fantastic event. And if the weather is anything like St. Paul, it's going to be a day that you don't want to miss at all. So weather is usually pretty good in Minnesota in the fall. It's typically our best season for that. And that's why we have some of these rides going on. And I will absolutely be there. And if you're there, please find me, say hello to me in person. If you can't finish your pie, I'll help you out with that as well.
There you go. It's a wonderful time of the year to be on your bike riding through over those bridges. That's the thing that always you know, stands out for me with the Mankato River Ramble, is those really cool
nice
bridges. That's very awesome. So Does anyone have any other closing comments or questions that you would like to fire at Michael or discuss before we wrap up the webinar today? All right. I see some thumbs up here. So thank you so much for joining the webinar today and talking about bike education throughout the state of Minnesota and advocacy, and learning a little bit more about the opportunities to get involved and engaged and share your local voices and have those heard and take action on all of what we talked about today. So please join us again in October for the next Bike Walk Leadership Network webinar. It's the third Wednesday of the month at 11:30. Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks, Michael, for speaking, and have a wonderful rest of the day.